attention, please.
I'm Eleanor Hamilton, and if you live somewhere near London or Birmingham, I may have accompanied you to work, even though you didn't invite me along. It's my voice that delivers tube announcements on the Underground. There is a good service operating on all London Underground lines. And you can hear me on Midland Metro trams too.
This tram terminates at Wolverhampton, St George's.
Wherever you hear me on the transport network, my husband, Phil Sayer, is usually not far away either.
This is a platform alteration.
He's the voice of all kinds of announcements, but his finest hour was probably when he got this gig.
Mind the gap.
We've worked together for almost 20 years, but unlike most happily married couples, we don't see each other anymore. In 2016, Phil passed away, leaving me and our 10-year-old twin boys minding a very big gap. It's lovely that we're still united in voice across the UK, but our story made me realise that everyone who does this kind of job is a real person, even though the sentences we speak are often rearranged by a computer without us knowing it. But actually, we all have a story. We're all real people who talk to you every day, but most people only talk back to us when we get information wrong or send you the wrong way down a motorway. So I've decided to share our Tales from the Tannoy. In this episode, I'm going to talk to a voice that everyone knows because his TV catchphrase delighted a generation of kids.
Kellogg's Frosties, they're great!
But while Tony the Tiger made life seem as easy to swallow as a bowl of Frosties, the man who gave him his voice had plenty of struggles of his own. Tom Clarke-Hill, tell me how you came to be the voice of everyone's favourite Tiger King.
Well, the original Tony the Tiger was a guy named Thurl Ravenscroft.
Okay.
How's that for a name, man?
That's amazing.
I think he had the gig almost 40 years.
Wow.
And so as a kid, I had his voice in my head. And this cattle call for a new Tony the Tiger came up after he passed away. The first time I went, there must have been 30, 40 guys walking up and down the hall going, they're great, they're great, they're great, they're great. You know, but I always remembered Tony from a child, Kellogg's Frosties, they're great. Mm-hmm. So, and then I wrote like a little rap. My name is Tony, the number one cat. I forget what it was. It was really cheesy. And so there's about 6 guys on the other side of the glass. And when I went into that, 2 or 3 of them were just rolling their eyes like, this guy's groveling for this gig, you know. Uh-huh. But then I got the call back, but the second time I went back, there was 10 guys.
Right.
And it was the same sort of dance. And then 2 weeks later, there was 5 guys. And I was supposed to go first, but one guy says, hey, man, he goes, you stick around, you're going to go last. And I thought, is that good or bad? I don't know.
Yeah.
And so they told all the other guys to leave, and then they said, let's hear you. And then I did it, and they said, you got the gig. And I always remember it as being 1999 because my youngest son was born in 99 or 98.
Right.
Yeah, 98. So he was in the pushchair when I got the call that I finally got the gig.
Wow. Did you knock him over?
And now he's 20 years old and 6'8".
Wow. Really?
Yeah.
Oh my God. Because you have 4 kids, don't you?
Yeah, I've got 4 kids. We had boy, boy, girl, boy.
Wow. And did you find that they were all over this at school? Did they love it? Did they love the fact that their dad was Tony the Tiger, or was it just boring to them?
They liked it at first, and then after a while, my 2 older sons would say, Dad, don't tell him, when they'd start school, because they'd have kids. Oh, your dad's great.
Yeah. So tell me about your wife.
Well, my first wife was named Jacqueline Clarke, and I was working as a musician on a cruise ship out of Los Angeles. And all the musicians were Americans, Californians mostly.
Right.
And all the casino girls were from the UK. And my line is, she saw me across a crowded staff dining room and thought, green card. But it was more than that,
Of course.
And she was awesome. And we worked on the ship together for a while. And then we got off. Then we got married. Then we went back on the ship for a while. And then we got off and lived in Los Angeles. We had Taylor. Then 4 years later, had Eric. So I was living in L.A. And my whole thing about living in Los Angeles was to hit the big time, But as it turned out, I was in one of the top big bands as a bass player. I was with a band called Les Brown and the Band of Renown.
Right.
We did like all the Bob Hope TV shows, and I got to do shows with like Frank Sinatra and Dean Martin and Tony Bennett and a whole bunch of people, Dolly Parton, Luther Vandross, all that stuff. And so I was making decent money as a bass player, doing studio work, but I wasn't doing much comedy and I wasn't doing much voiceovers. And then I took a class with a woman named Ginny Tyler, who used to be on staff at Hanna-Barbera.
Right.
And she started using me to dub cartoons. And it was trial by fire because everybody thinks, oh, I'd love to do a cartoon. But this was like revoicing Japanese or Russian cartoons.
Yeah.
Which was like, the Japanese thing would, let's say the line is, watch out, he's over there. The Japanese mouth movement would be, like you say, watch out, he's over there, man. And the Russians would be the exact opposite, like, vorsky, morsky, vitsky, vorsky, like, hey, man, watch out, he's over there, dude, that sort of thing. And you had to get it off the paper and onto the, get those lip movements down.
Yeah.
And I think it was after the Rodney King trial, L.A. just got crazy. And I had friends like, these peaceful, fun-loving musicians carrying guns to work. I just had this epiphany one night. I think down at the local high school, a couple of kids got in a fight. And the next day, one came back with his dad's 9mm and started waving it around. And I thought, I've got such a smart mouth and I've been such a sarcastic kid all my life. And I've been in fights and, just because of the stuff that I say. But if you get in a fight with a gang member or something like that, it's all over,
Of course.
And I thought, why am I in Los Angeles? It's like I'm playing music, but it seems like the more I need, just to keep above water with our income and stuff. And I said, so Jackie, one day I said, we ought to go to your country, man. It's safer there.
Yeah.
And she's like, I don't know. I always wanted to come here all my life,
Yeah.
And then, but she succumbed to it. And we came over here in 93 and really never looked back, man. It was beautiful. And I started working at the Ronnie Scott's in Birmingham.
Oh, yeah. Yeah.
And the Ronnie Scott's in Birmingham, there was a receptionist, Dee. Her name was Dee, or short for Diane or something like that.
Yeah.
And I had to go try to get permanent residency sticker in my passport. And she worked for immigration as well down near the airport.
Oh, wow.
And she sees me in this big long line, with, about 20 people in front of me. And she gives me this like real stern look and says, excuse me, come over here. Like I'm in trouble or something like that. And she fast tracks me and stamps this thing in my book. So it's
Fantastic.
Like amazing. It's like, I don't know what your religious beliefs or if you think there's a higher power or like universal wonderful things happening, but I think the fact that when I moved over here, it wasn't about my career. It was about creating a better life for my kids.
Yeah.
And then all of a sudden my career just opened up, instead of just being another guy with an American accent playing the bass and trying to do voiceovers and acting in L.A. Over here, I kind of became a little more exotic.
Yeah.
And the same thing with agents, too. Jackie had an aunt that worked for Central Television.
Right.
And she hooked me up with my first voiceover agent and my first acting agent. And then I started working right away, man.
And your kids settled in okay with it? How old were they when they came over?
The oldest was 4 and the youngest was 4 months.
Right.
And then so that was 93. And about 95, I started getting Taylor some work as a kid with an American accent, from home.
Right, yeah.
We took him down to a few ADR dubbing sessions down in Soho as well. And he took to it like a duck to water, man. That was really good.
And I think the younger they are and they've seen you do it for years and years and they just kind of just get it. Mine were quite popular because they had Bolton accents.
Yeah.
And of course, that's quite a nice accent and quite popular now to have regional accents on commercials and stuff. And I think that if they know nothing else, it's when they get a bit older, they become a little bit self-conscious and they don't want to do it anymore. But
Taylor, he kept his American accent. It got to a thing. I remember when he was 8 or 9, he started to sound a little more Worcestershire.
Yeah.
And then that's my, I don't know, Herefordshire sort of a thing, or like some sort of a weird twang. I think he was 12 or 13, and some kids at school have been calling him a Yank and worse.
Right.
And he goes, that's it. He goes, man, I'm not going to talk like this anymore. But he was already mixed up. He'd say, oh, man, I dropped my banana, or hey, dude, you want some water? Like he was all over the shop. But he says, okay, I'm not going to do that anymore. I said, oh, that's too bad, man, because there's this job here. It pays 60 quid, for his 30-second commercial. And he went, I'm American.
Good lad.
Yeah, so he just stuck with it, and he's really good. I mean, he kind of fit in with any group of people,
Yeah.
So it doesn't sound like a tourist American,
So you moved back to the UK. And you had 2 more children?
Yeah, my daughter's 22 now, so Taylor's 30, Eric's 26, and then 4 years later we had Aaliyah, who's 22, and then 2 years after that, Quentin.
Right. So they're quite big gaps, actually, when,
Yeah.
Gosh, Jacqueline must have been exhausted.
The kids came first with her,
Yeah.
and then later on with me. I think I've got to admit, she always wanted a large family, and it's a tough one, man. You probably saw the same thing happen is when we had all those years and years of living together where we didn't have any children to think about. When I was in the States, when we had Taylor, I'd go on a 6-week tour every summer with a big band, and every once in a while Jackie'd give me a jab. Oh, look who's coming through the door! It's Uncle Dad. Oh, here comes good cop, that sort of thing, So,
well, I mean, it must have worked it out because you went on to have 3 more children. So I guess
we were together. We were together for over 28 years.
Fantastic. So she became ill when the kids were relatively young, didn't she?
Yeah, the youngest was 6.
Wow. Okay.
And so it was a 5-year battle with cancer, and she had an untreatable form of cancer called GIST, which are growths in the stomach lining. And for a long time, she thought she had, ulcers or this or that. It was always like pain in her throat and upper stomach area. When she got diagnosed, it was like you can't believe it, man. We went to this hospital and then they did like an ultrasound which had always been for a baby. You see how a baby's doing, and there's one. Oh, there's another one. So there's 12 of these things in her stomach. So there was never a chance of like, we're going to cut it out and see what happens, And also radiotherapy never worked on that form, and neither did chemo. The only thing that kind of slowed the process was some experimental pills for other things that they found kind of shrunk tumors and stuff. And we had 2 years of we were hopeful that this thing might stop it or this thing might stop it. And then the last 3 years were just, mostly negative. It just kept getting worse, and the physical symptoms were worse.
Yeah. I understand.
But she was a trooper, man. She was a trooper. She came from really tough stock, and nobody wants to play God. Mom doesn't feel good, but she's going to get better, that sort of thing, to the younger two.
Yeah.
And then I think the older two at a certain point, we told them this is cancer, but when she started some of this experimental drug that was shrinking the tumors, the oncologist, she says to him, she goes, so how long have these worked for people? And instead of saying, man, we've had people go 5 years, he said, no one's ever made it past 5 years.
Wow.
And that day, she goes, that guy's just giving me my death sentence. And I said, well, yeah, if you choose to believe him, but he doesn't know. We tried a lot of other things too. We did a thing called Gerson therapy,
right?
Which if you check up on that online, Dr. Gerson was pretty amazing, and it was alternative, like blasting enzymes into your system with 8 or 10 juices a day, either carrot, apple, spinach, and all this other stuff, and then also flushing out your system in a specific way.
Yeah.
He had a clinic in Mexico. Uh-huh. And at one point, we were considering sending her there, It's just like a lot of people, too.
Anything,
if they've been thrown on the dust heap in the UK or in the United States, and they go to China, and then 10 years later, they're alive.
Yeah.
Through acupressure, acupuncture, and Chinese herbs. So who knows,
and you'll try anything, won't you?
Yeah, sure.
And until they're actually dead, you just keep going and keep going and keep going.
I've never really had a concrete sort of a religious belief, But I agree with all religions about, the kingdom of heaven is within, or there's some sort of a universal power or something like that. And from my crazy past, I've been saved too many times to not think that I've got angels watching after me or something like that,
Yeah.
But I leave that to everybody to find a power of their own understanding sort of a thing,
Of course.
And I've always been kind of a doubting Thomas, about, like miracles and this and that,
Yeah.
But when Jackie actually died, it was a bank holiday weekend. And on the Friday, my neighbor across the road had lost his wife about 6 months before. And we were talking outside, and he was saying, yeah, when she was dying, the nurse was talking to me, and I said, I don't see why she just keeps hanging on. And the nurse looked at him, and she said, have you told her it's okay to go? And he goes, and then I went and I told her it was okay to go. And then she went. And so I'd already said that to Jackie. I already said, I don't want to see you hurting anymore. The kids are going to be all right. We got it covered. We're going to miss you, but I don't want you to hang around. Yeah. And but I hadn't had the kids do that. And so I went and individually, I told each one of them that same thing that I told you about the neighbor and about me telling her. And I said, you don't have to if you don't want to. But if you want to let her go and have, then go up there. And each kid on that Friday night went upstairs and they spent some really quality time with her where she was still coherent. And it was beautiful. And that was the day that my youngest, who was 11, I just had to say, where we were saying that Mom would get better and she's just sick. And I said, she's not going to get better. And he goes, well, what could happen? I said, what do you think? And she could die. And I went, yeah. And then I told him that, and he went up and did the same thing. They all went up and told her it was okay to go. Yeah. And then on the Saturday, that evening in bed, I could feel her like just shutting down. And then about 2:30 on Sunday afternoon, we're in the room and we're playing music and just kind of stroking her head and whatever like that. And I got up and started walking around and my sister-in-law goes, she's looking for you. She's looking for you. And I go over there and her eyes are like wide open. Wow. And it's like somebody looking down the wrong end of a telescope. Right. It was amazing. It was like this distant, ancient sort of a look. And what I took from that was, it's been great hanging out with you, but I got to go. Yeah. And then in a flash, I felt her go up. I felt her spirit go up and her body went down. It was drastic. It just totally deflated, like boom. It was amazing. Wow. And it freaked me out, Of course. And then later on, somebody said, what a gift, you know, because I'll never, ever doubt that we're not spiritual beings having a physical experience. No. It was magic. It was magic, The other thing about organizing the funeral, on the Friday, Jackie wouldn't admit to anybody that she was dying. She wouldn't even say it. And then some guy came around from St. Richard's Hospice, and she was like, who is this guy? Get him out of here, sort of a thing. And then our doctor came, our GP, who was a lady named Dr. Wilkie, and she just got down and Jackie's eye level and said, Jackie, you know what's happening, don't you? She goes, yeah, I'm dying. And she goes, is there anything you want to talk about? And I said, we talked about cremation, and she went, do you want cremation or burial? Just to double check. And she said cremation. And I said, do you want to be buried, do you want us to spread your ashes on the beach or the Malverns? And she went, the Malverns. And we talked about that before too. And so 3 days after she's passed away, I'm at the funeral director's and I go in there and this guy gives me this menu, to pick of your caskets. And it falls open on page 11. And they're all named after areas. And page 11, and I guess the name of the casket is called the Malvern. And listen to this. This like a gray, dismal, rainy day. And this beam of sun comes through the friggin' window, man. Wow. I swear to God, as soon as this page opens up and this beam of sun comes through the window, and I'm like, okay.
Hi, darling.
All right.
You're here.
There we go.
Yeah. It is amazing, isn't it? And I think if you open your heart to these things, who knows whether they're really there or not. But I've had similar things from Phil, and I just think it doesn't matter if he's actually not there. I like to think he is. Yeah. And I think that must be really comforting to you as well, that, if they can send me a message, they will. Yep. And how wonderful to have that comfort. So presumably she had the Malvern. And
yep, she got the Malvern.
Oh, good.
And then we had a service at the Worcester Crematorium, and all kinds of people showed up, man. All I did was I told a few close friends, and I put it on Facebook. And in there was standing room only, is packed out. Wonderful. And then afterwards we had a reception and played music, and it was beautiful. So how did your kids cope? They all had their own little journey, And the strongest and the most supporting, of course, was my oldest, was Taylor. Yeah. And he was really good, and he stepped in and helped drive the kids to school afterwards and all that other stuff. But sometimes I don't know if he totally processed it and let it go. I don't know that. The 18-year-old was already a little bit off the rails before it happened. And then he changed from kind of an emo sort of a guy, playing music with his skinny trousers and his hair down to his eyebrows. You've got to have one like that. He started wearing trackies and shaving his head and running with some tough kids and becoming an aggressor. Right. And I later found out, that somebody beat him up. A few guys had beat him up, and then he became one of them for a while.
Yeah.
And when Jackie died, he went off the rails and got in a lot of fights and a lot of anger and stuff,
But it's all fueled by anger, isn't it?
It went for a while too, 18 probably till about 22. Like he had a 4-year run of being, he had to go out and go through the wilderness. And I had a similar, I didn't have exactly the same story, but that period of time in my life, I'm in recovery. I just celebrated 40 years clean and sober on April 7th.
Well done, you.
But I got sober when I was 25.
Right.
But the years 18 to 22, 23, well, actually 18 to 25, were insane. Really? Insane. I was ruthless and crazy and car wrecks. And I'm so lucky nobody ever died as a result of my bad behavior,
Yeah.
But this guy, he went through what he had to go through, and he's really good now. He's an awesome kid.
That's great.
He's an awesome young man.
Yeah.
And then my daughter grabbed it by the horns, man. She went to this thing called Noah's Ark,
Right.
which I think it's a charity that's since folded. And they had a program in Malvern where they went to kind of a place where you camp, you sleep in a bunkhouse with all these other kids who've lost their parents or a loved one or something like that. And then on the third day, I went to pick her up, and all the kids had their parents' name written on a balloon, a helium balloon, and then they let them all go at the same time, and they all went off into the clouds, except the ones with Jackie on it. Aaliyah let it go, and it got stuck in a tree. And I said, "Isn't that just like your mom?" And I said, "Tell her she can go now." And she goes, "Go on, Mom," or something like that. And it kind of wiggled around a little bit, and then it floated off,
Oh, wonderful.
So she grabbed it right away.
Yeah.
And the youngest, luckily, one of the things that Jackie got the 2 youngest into was horse riding.
Right.
And so Quentin at that time was 11, and they'd been horse riding since for 5 years. And my daughter, as soon as you start to have to muck out the stables and do all the gritty work and all that, she's like, I don't care about riding horses anymore. But Quentin was way into it.
Right.
And he had a tough little teacher, this woman named Sue, who was just really good with him. She was strict, but just very loving. And it was probably the most nurturing place that he could have been at the time, because it was all women that ran it.
Right.
So it's like, the female sort of energy, taking care of him, but also giving him guidance. And he kept saying, "Hey, Dad, when are we gonna get a horse?" I said, "Well, I got about $30,000 in the bank. Why don't you come ask me then?" And there was this old working horse, like not an Irish draft or something, one with the shaggy feet, named Jasper. And Jasper was 15 years old, and he'd just been ridden around in circles by all these screaming kids and stuff. And one day, Jasper decided to rebel and never let anyone ride him again.
Wow.
And so no one could get on this horse. And he could open gates with his mouth, and he would open gates and let other horses out into other fields and stuff like that. He would crawl over the top of a horse box. He was a real renegade, proper traveler. So Quentin goes down in the field where Jasper is, like the owner had 3 or 4 other horses, so she's just like letting him graze in this field. He kind of looks like Eeyore, and Quentin goes down and starts talking to him, He says, "Jasper, remember me?" Because that was the first horse he'd ever ridden. And then he just puts a little, like a rope on it, starts leading it around, talking to him. Next thing you know, they go, he's bareback riding in the field. Tell him he's got to have a saddle on, like that.
Yeah.
And the lady that owned him says, "Look, you pay the livery on that horse, and he can say it's his."
Wow.
And by the time he outgrew, like he was 6'3" by the time he was 13.
Wow.
By the time he outgrew that horse, he was in competitions doing show jumping, dressage, and cross country with that horse, man.
You're kidding.
No.
Wow.
And Jasper turned into a real competitor, man. And then one day, Quentin starts playing the drums. And all my kids are musical, but he starts playing the drums again in earnest with some friends in a band. And then he gets this cute little girlfriend, and he says, "Dad," he goes, "I don't know if I want to do this anymore, And so I said, "Well, son, if you're really sure." And inside my head, I'm going, "Yes, yes." There's like a band going, da, 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 da. Woohoo! What am I going to do with that $800 a month? And so sold the horse, sold the box, and the the rest is mystery. So that really helped him cope with the whole deal.
Yeah, they just need a focus, don't they, I think?
What did your kids do?
They are okay, but when they've had moments where they've lost direction, that's where things have gone a bit wrong for them, I guess. And like your second son, I think they both have been through stages of being really angry, but it's beginning to dissipate, I think. I think they're both beginning to go, okay, right, my mum isn't going to die, I don't think, which of course that was their big fear, because of course I was poorly after Phil. So
well done you.
Oh, well, do you know what, though? And you'll probably understand this. I have a bit of a problem with people who call it, who say that you've won the battle.
Yeah.
Because for people like Phil and like Jacqueline, you just think, if it was a battle, they'd have won it. There was nobody that could have fought harder than them.
Yeah.
And it suggests that they didn't try hard enough.
Yeah.
And actually, they bloody well did.
Yeah.
They would never have left their kids. They adored their families. So please don't call it a battle. It's not a battle.
Yeah.
It's luck. So it's lovely to kind of think, for my boys, it's wonderful to say, yep, still here and still able to bring them up. But I would hate for anybody to say she won the battle, but her husband didn't, and nor did anyone else that died from cancer, because actually that's not true.
Yeah.
I guess you just deal with it in whichever way that you can. But luckily for you, things have gone on a happier trajectory in the last few years, by the sounds of it. You met Izzy.
Yes, I did. And we took our time, and she's never tried to be a mom to the kids.
No.
And she never had kids herself, but she just wanted to be their friend.
Yeah.
And they've really taken to her, and she's
That's
awesome.
great.
It's tough, you feel guilty or I did. I felt really
yeah.
guilty getting with somebody else. And also I felt guilty for being needy, when my kids should have been the first priority, maybe or whatever, And, people, everybody's got their own life to live.
But what people don't realise is that it is actually possible to love more than one person, simply because love is an emotion that has no limit by definition. You've got 4 kids, you could have had another 10, and it wouldn't have stopped you loving Taylor, the first one, as much as, you know what I'm saying.
I do.
It's a shame, actually, if people don't accept that life moves on, because what are you supposed to do? Are you supposed to live the same life and, wear a black shirt for the rest of your life? And
well, some people do, and I mean, there was a mechanic in my hometown, and he lost his wife. And after that, I used to see him just looking at the ground, and I'd say, come on, man, it's one day at a time. And I think that's one of the things that recovery has given me, is to live every day, one day at a time, and to have a higher power of your own understanding that you can turn your will and your life over to, And that's another thing too, it's like I heard a really good thing last night, is that self can't get away from self.
No.
So when people, take something, I don't know, have you ever listened to Eckhart Tolle as well? He talks about the, like when you were born, you weren't Elinor, until you realized that that's what your parents were calling you. And then that became your name. And then you realized that was your house. I'm Elinor and I live in that house and these are my toys and all this other stuff like that. But really, the essence of you is so much bigger and vast than that, and also connected with so much other stuff, I feel really blessed that I had Jackie in my life and now I've got Izzy in my life. And
it's almost like people expect a happy ever after, don't they? And I think that when people like these dream weddings, because they think, right, well, that's our happy ever after. And actually, it isn't. That's when it all begins. And every chapter, every part of your life is a chapter, and these chapters overlap. And the chapter of your first marriage ended when Jacqueline died, but your life didn't end. Your chapter did. That there's a new chapter, and you have to kind of see yourself as, you have to be open, I think, to new experiences and new lives, because if you try and live that same life without her in it, you're only going to be miserable. I
don't know if I haven't really retreated into being depressed or anything like that for any long period of time. I remember initially, it was the shock of it. I can remember about 3 or 4 months of just something I'd never, ever experienced in my life. There were moments where I would just have to say to myself, okay, I'm breathing in, I'm breathing out,
Yeah.
What does this kid need? What does that kid need? What does that kid need? What does that kid need? What do I do for work? Something like that. And just taking a moment to moment. And then after a while, things start happening. and great people around you support you.
Yeah.
And then it starts a whole new chapter, like you said.
Yeah, you start living each day just to get to the end of each day. And then after a while, you realise that you're looking ahead to 3 days, and you might be looking ahead to the end of the week. Because I certainly felt that actually just waking up in the morning was so depressing. Having to think, oh God, I've got another 18 hours of this shit. Where are we going to go? But, eventually you do get to the end, don't you?
I mean, I think about the people. I mean, the only reason I ever ended up over here anyway is I had a cousin who was a bass player that when I lived in California, he had called me up one night and he says, hey, come over to the East Coast and study the bass. And he was kind of like, he took me out of this, and it was while I was going pretty crazy in California. I was doing all kinds of nutty stuff. I was working and I was moving around and stuff. But once I got over there and I started playing music, it gave me a whole new profession, which got me on that cruise ship, which got me over here, married to Jackie, and created a whole new life for me. So my cousin's name was Tiny.
Right. Was he 6'9" as well?
Yeah, no, he was 350 pounds. He was about 6'2", but he was a big guy. And I can feel him there. And it's just like sometimes if I'm thinking about what should I do for the kids or something, I'll say, well, what do you think? And I just leave that out as if Jackie's there responding. And who knows if I'm getting messages or not, or just I kind of remember the way that she would kind of deal with things. It keeps it a lot simpler. All I know is I don't know.
Kellogg's Frosties, they're great!
You've been listening to Tales from the Tannoy with Elinor Hamilton and Tom Clarke-Hill, and with music from Beats Bakery. This podcast was produced by Carl Svensson at Tadar Media.